that after the call.
Yeah, please do. That would be great.
So not a problem. What I'll do is I will just share my screen. Slideshow. Amazing. Can people see a presentation and it's full screen? It's like kind of visible for everyone.
Yeah, just right.
Amazing. So the presentation today, what I've tried to do is just first a huge thank you to Community Energy South for hosting us. It worked with the team for a good amount of time now, and it's really lovely to just see so many people on the call, and just a huge thanks to all the work that you're doing for building more capacity for community energy in the sector. It's a wonderful industry, and it's really just really heartening to kind of be proud of it. So just thank you everyone for that work and for hosting us today. I will touch a bit on the education and happy to answer more questions about it. The kind of presentation that I've got today is a general introduction, because I didn't know whether people have heard of Solar for Schools before or kind of the level of information. So it'll be a bit of an introduction, and we'll touch on a few things, but any questions after, just let me know. But I promise this isn't how I start every presentation. But I thought it might be, I find it really nice when someone kind of introduces themselves at the start of a presentation, so you know who you're talking to, and kind of where the information that you're hearing today is coming from. And I'll also touch on kind of the three parts of what I would love to introduce to you kind of in the presentation. So just to give you an idea of who I am. So I'm based in Leeds myself, but our organisation is obviously UK wide. I've been working for Solar for Schools for over 4 years. In that time, we've grown from a very small organisation to one of the largest community energy organisations that is working nationally. So it's obviously a huge, I'm very proud to kind of be part of that process. I've also got a bit of wider experience in the sector, so have worked with the great organisation Community Energy England, with their networks and learning. So I've got to meet groups around the country and kind of see the value of national programmes like Solar for Schools when we work in partnership. And so I'm currently leading, I do work with schools and I work with councils every day, so actually delivering projects. And then the kind of capacity that I'm in here today is our wider work, where we're looking to support partners across the country. So that's councils, it's also community groups. You don't have to be a community energy group, you can just be a community group that wants to help a school. So you don't have to be an energy group per se, but we work with schools and councils and community energy groups around the country. So that's kind of the capacity that I'm here today. And what I'll do is I'll just give a brief introduction to our programme. I'll touch on some funding announcements that I'm really excited to kind of share with you, and hopefully a bit of a track record and case studies. So you've got a bit of a flavour of who's done this before, and maybe a bit of a vision of how it could help either your group or your council, just the importance of having precedent. So hopefully can provide a bit of that. But to kind of give a brief introduction to Solar for Schools. So as I mentioned before, we're a UK-wide programme. We've got over 100 schools. I think we're close to 120 now, actually, in terms of schools that we've worked with. What we do is we work across the country, and any school is eligible for the Solar for Schools programme. The idea is that we offer schools that don't have funding to develop solar to access funding, and also to have an organisation guide them through that process. So schools have absolutely no time. They don't have time to learn the ins and outs of how to develop a solar project. So we work with schools to develop that and to offer the funding and to guide them through that process. And we're now kind of one of the largest deliverers of that. We work with all governance types as well. So this is just a screenshot from one of our beautiful schools, actually in my city. So I am biased, I do apologise. But I feel really proud of the work that we're doing, particularly to bring solar into the north. We do work across the country, but we're really focusing on trying to bring solar to schools that might not access it otherwise. So this is a photo from our work with Leeds City Council, Hollybush Primary. They also had a heat pump installed in their project. So actually renewables now cover about 96% of the school's total energy needs. It's a huge project and something that we're really proud of. So we do work with councils and council schools. I've also just kind of given some flavour because we also work with Multi-Academy Trust. So this is one of our latest projects, Oxford Spires. It's a really, really great school. Back in 2013, they actually shut down, and they've done a huge amount of work to bring them back now. So the school is open and doing absolutely brilliantly. So we work with Multi-Academy Trusts. We also work with Diocese. So this is one of our most recent schools in the Diocese of Coventry. And this is a Hallas Academy. Again, it was put into special measures back in 2016, but is now doing brilliantly. It's got its best ever Ofsted rating, and now they're looking to carry on that innovation and look to bring renewables onto their site to help them lower energy costs. So we do work across loads of different governance structures, and kind of at the heart of that is, in particular, we have a focus on partnerships. So we're obviously one team, and there's thousands of schools around the country. We can never develop all the projects, and we can never support every school. So partners are a really, really huge part of that for helping us do what we do best and bring it to more schools around the country. I'll talk a bit more on York Community Energy, who is in the picture here, but just to say we put partnerships at the heart, and that's why we're here today. In terms of, I'm sure there'll be more questions on this because I'm giving a very kind of whirlwind tour, but in terms of just kind of some key parts of the programme and working in partnership with us, there are some kind of key highlights here. So the idea behind it is that the programme has developed from some of the early days of solar, where schools didn't have the best time, actually. So when a lot of people were making money from the feed-in tariff, schools were kind of, a lot of schools were really burned in that. So installers kind of went to schools and offered fully funded projects, but they didn't offer long-term looking after of solar systems. They didn't provide kind of education for schools. So you had a lot of schools actually who had some bad experiences with solar. So our programme has developed in response to that. It's a school-run programme, so the decisions of the kind of national programme are actually made by schools themselves. And the idea behind it is that we're trying to offer a holistic programme that allows councils, allows community groups, and allows schools themselves to be thinking long-term. So we offer fully funded projects. There's no end-of-life cost, so at the end of the project itself, the schools, the council, the group have the choice to decide what they want to do with their project. So they can not have the panels, they can give them back to the programme, or they can keep them to gain free electricity. Totally up to the school, no cost for doing any of those options. We work with schools for 25 years because we want a long-term relationship. So we support schools with kind of the full asset management. So there's no cost to the schools or councils for any sort of costs that come with looking after a solar system. All the kind of liability is with solar for schools. So councils really like that because they don't take on financial risk. But we also, I'll touch on this a bit more, and we have the pack after, which I can send to Community Energy South. Key part of our programme is that ultimately we're here for students and to provide education. Solar systems are a really, really brilliant way of introducing renewable energy as a topic into schools. And students absolutely love it, particularly when we bring out things like the drones. So this is a drone image of one of our schools with York Community Energy. And that provides, basically within every project that we do, there's 25 years of student education built in. So I'll touch on that a little bit more. We also offer maximum flexibility for schools. So there's flexibility for schools to adjust their pricing throughout the programme. One of the worries that schools have is, are they going to be locked into something for 25 years? Absolutely not. So there's flexibility because it's a school-run programme. They need that in there. And one thing that I'll just highlight for council partners, there is also options in the programme if councils want to use the funding opportunity to develop solar, but medium to long term are looking to own solar assets in the area, so to have local ownership, there's options to buy back systems as well. So I can take more questions on that, but they're usually kind of the key highlights that people like to know as an introduction. I won't really touch on this, but these are just some slides to kind of show the level of support that is offered in looking after solar systems for the long term. This is really often quite key for people. They don't want financial risk long term. We don't want to put any burdens on schools or councils. So just to kind of show the level of asset management support that's available. All of our systems have these tiny SIM cards that send data from every solar array every 15 minutes. So this is an example of kind of the daily monitoring that goes on to make sure that systems are being looked after for schools. So I'll just flick through this. I can touch on this anymore at the end, but just to show the level of support that's offered in that long-term management. And that's done by our a contract partner called Solar Options for Schools, who is a social impact business that specialises in supporting schools in this long-term partnership. Just touch on, so in the 25 years of education, this is one of our latest innovations. We do obviously in-person assemblies, in-person workshops. We go to schools. We include students in things like the initial visit. So when we come to site, we get students flying the drones so they can see the solar panels, and they can look at their buildings. They help us within the development process. One of the kind of latest innovations, which I just wanted to show, is we also have a lot of software and kind of things built into IT, because we obviously know schools have a lot and we can't always go in as often as we'd like. So we provide lots of software education as well. This is one of our current projects. It's the Solar for Schools app. It's actually also just got a second round of funding from Innovate UK, which supports kind of education innovation and other areas of business innovation. So it's now available for schools for their IT lessons, so we can actually use it on kind of computers, and it's not just app-based as well. It's a brilliant app. You can go on the Play Store right now and have a look at it, but the idea is it introduces different parts of energy education for students and gives them a pathway for doing that. So teachers can set homeworks, they can check in the progress, they can use it in the IT lessons, and it covers things like renewable energy generation, but also efficiency, fuel poverty, things like that. It's a window into the world of energy. I don't want to, just checking that we're okay on time. That's brilliant. The kind of next thing that I just wanted to touch on was around kind of funding that is out there for councils and for community groups. So if you are a group, you're wanting to support your school, or if you're a council and you're wanting to support a school or a group of schools, the kind of program itself, we use community investment funding. So you can go fully funded through our program just by kind of reaching out to us. And if the sites are good sites for solar, we offer fully funded. But I just wanted to touch on, because I know we've got a few councils here today. I'm sorry this is a bit of a messy screen, but I want to make sure you had all the info in the presentation. Just to flag a few additional things that I think are really helpful right now in terms of funding and potential for solar. We've been told by the UK Infrastructure Bank, who have recently just updated their policy on local authority lending, that we, in any kind of presentations and conversations that we're having with councils, to let them know that if they're looking to integrate solar with other decarbonisation works, so a lot of councils right now are looking into heat pumps and gas transition. It's where a lot of costs come for councils. Our programme is eligible for integrating solar into that. So the UK Investment Bank, it's part of they offer very low interest rates for loans for local authorities. So if they're in the councils that are looking into this or are interested in looking at solar plus other technologies, heat pumps, things like that, it's a quick turnaround, and we've been told to inform councils that we're eligible for that. It meets a lot of the investment principles that you're looking at, and it can help in terms of your funding bid. So to kind of just touch on how that is helpful if you're looking at solar or other tech. If you can use things like the Infrastructure Bank to gain really low interest rates on your borrowing, you can make lower electricity costs, basically so schools can gain better prices long term through the programme. You obviously then make higher savings to your schools and your council. We have a profit share in the programme, which will be higher if you use kind of borrowing like this. And in terms of paying back loans, I'll touch on this a little bit more with our work with Leeds City Council, but it's a self-sustaining business model. So the savings from the solar and the electricity savings to schools can help councils pay back the loans, so they don't have to find that money So it's a self-sustaining kind of business model. Again, I've mentioned there is long-term flexibility if councils actually wanted to use the funding and buyback systems long-term. So I can touch on that a bit more, but just to flag it. Just to touch on, we've done kind of broader work that's quite similar to this with Leeds City Council. They were using public sector decarbonisation funding as opposed to borrowing. So this was a grant scheme. And then Solar for Schools also put in community investment. So it was a co-invested scheme. But the council did a similar thing of integrating solar with heat pumps and other technologies, so LEDs and things like that. They've done a huge amount of work. We've got over 30 schools now in the area of Leeds. So just to kind of flag that work that's been done. This actually is phase 2, so the 4.3 million. We worked on them previously with a £25 million bid as well. So they've done a huge amount of work over the past couple of years. And they said they're happy to speak to councils that are wanting to discuss kind of what the relationship has been like with Solar for Schools. The grant funding that I just wanted to announce to community groups as well, it's also relevant to councils. But just as we're on the call, and there's obviously groups from around different regions, Solar for Schools, we've just been signed a partnership agreement with National Grid, which means that National Grid are looking to support schools in particular areas. So I've just flagged it here. National Grid is formerly Western Power Distribution. So it's a DNO, a district network operator that is now called National Grid. And they are looking to give £500,000 a year to Solar for Schools to support schools in these particular areas. So if you are in these areas, please do get in touch with us. It means that as well as the programme offering you funding, we can mix that with grant funding, which means that you can get even better savings for your schools. So if you are in these areas, let us know. The final thing, I'm aware I don't want to overrun on my time, but I just wanted to give a flavour of existing partnerships and to kind of offer a bit of a vision so that it doesn't just feel all very abstract. But as I said before, we've been working across the UK and we've got a good track record of partnerships, both for community groups. I've already touched on some with councils, so I'll focus on kind of groups for this last bit. I mentioned previously York Community Energy. So York is a fantastic example. I'll touch on it a little bit more, but we began work with them about 3 years ago. They've currently got 5 schools that have had installations, obviously with the full kind of maintenance, education support and funding through Solar for Schools. They've got another 2 more schools in kind of detailed feasibility, 10 more with kind of funding offers from Solar for Schools, and 12 more that they're currently speaking to around the city to kind of develop solar projects. They've really used Solar for Schools as a springboard to kind of build their organisation. So this is a recent quote from Rich, who used to formerly be the chair. They've just elected a new chair. But when we met York Community Energy back in 2020, they didn't have a lot to show for. They were a fantastic organisation. It's quite common across the sector, but they were small. They were everyone was volunteering in their spare time, and no matter how hard they tried, they could not get projects off the ground. 3 years later, the organisation is now looking to hire a 5th staff member. So they've got 4 employees that they are able to sustainably employ. And they're looking to hire a 5th by the end of this year. And they've just been given a finalist nomination for the Progress and Expansion by Community Energy England. So they're up there in terms of having built their organisation. They're being recognised by the sector as really developing in that time. Where York kind of started with this work was they didn't have funding, they didn't have a lot of time. So they got in contact with us because they wanted to develop projects, solar projects, without capital and without having a lot of capacity. So we've worked with them to develop their first kind of 5 projects. And through that, what they've done is they've managed to gain contact with the councils. They've managed to really set themselves in the local community to show that they can kind of deliver projects. And how they've then used that is they've developed wider work. So on the right-hand side, this was earlier this year before we completed the last 1.5 installations. This was at their AGM, but what they've done is they've used the solar projects to springboard other areas of work. So they've got a retrofit advice service. They did a huge amount of fuel poverty work with their warm homes program. So they've now got just under 100K in grant funding for their warm homes work. And they've got a retrofit advice service, which actually they earn income from to help pay their employees as well. So it's a really great example of how a partnership with kind of a larger program has helped an organization that is just starting out and is trying really, really hard, but ultimately could use support to then develop into a self-sustaining social impact business. And yeah, just a huge shout out to Rich and the organization for that. It's been a pleasure working with them. These are just some really beautiful kind of drone photos from some of the York installations. So this is one of the buildings of Archbishop Holgate's, one of their latest installations, which is just an absolutely gorgeous school. So one of their first 5. And then just to finish, I wanted to touch on some other partners who are great examples as well. So Otley Energy have had 3 projects installed with us between 2019 and 2021. So Otley is obviously close with Leeds. So I know Andy really well, he's wonderful. And Otley, they actually have 2 schools with us, and then we put some solar panels onto the local library as well, because Otley really wanted the local library having solar panels on it. How Otley have then used this, very similar to York actually, is they've used the solar projects as a springboard to develop great relationships with not only the council, but in West Yorkshire, there is the West Yorkshire Combined Authority. So Otley and Andy are now doing really, really amazing work on trying to get funding for a street-by-street retrofit program called Better Homes. And it was kind of through the first projects working with us that we were able to just really show what they can do. So that's a final example. The other one that I'll just touch on, so that we're not always based in Yorkshire, is Oldham Community Power. We're working with them right now. So they've actually developed 3 solar projects without us years ago. They were one of the real pioneers in the sector. But what they've struggled with over the past couple of years is looking after their systems. So they find it increasingly costly to keep up all the costs for their schools and to keep the prices down low. So they're now working with Solar for Schools on their kind of looking after their sites long term. And then we've got 3 schools that are looking at funding as well. So new schools in development. And where this kind of fits in terms of not only the community groups, but also the councils that are looking into solar in their area, is we're trying to bring in board, this is the UK Business Council, the idea of an inclusive business approach. So a lot of councils have not used some of their levelling up funds and things like that. But a key part of what a lot of councils are trying to do now seems to be bringing the community into developing new projects in the area and making sure that they're supporting small businesses to accelerate and also bring communities into the transition, not only of energy, obviously across loads of different sectors. That's really hard for new groups to do without an existing programme that can kind of provide everything that councils also need in terms of due diligence and signing off on solar projects. So we're here to support communities and councils to bring themselves together to develop solar projects. And so I think that was this is my final slide, Liz. I hope I've kept the time. But yeah, more than happy to take any questions from that. I appreciate that was lots of information, but I wanted to make sure that there was lots to take away from today. But if anyone has any schools or you're interested in working with us, then that's my email, and that is also my phone as well. So please feel free.
Shannon, thanks so much. That was a really interesting presentation. And what I've most taken away from it actually is actually how much the sector has grown and the maturity of the sector, and how the maturity of organizations like yours can kind of springboard new groups, which is really quite exciting. I see we've got some questions, but I think what we'll do is go and have the other two presentations first, and then we'll put out, we will open it up to questions. There's a couple of questions in the chat, and also Henry, I see you there with your question. I've made a list, I've linked that, and there's some other questions coming up in the chat. But I think we'll address all of those after the other two presentations. So I want to hand over now to Paul Hallas, who has done a project with LEDs in schools, just because, you know, obviously we, as well as doing the generation side, we do need to look at the powering down side. Also, they've done a couple of solar projects, not using solar for schools. So they've got a different experience. Paul, I can't see you, but I know you're here somewhere.
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me okay?
Right, we can hear you. Yep, great.
Let me just share my screen. Let's see if that works.
Thanks.
Hope everybody can see that okay.
Yeah, we can see you.
Brilliant. Good, good. I think I've been told to keep it to about 10 minutes. So
yes, that would be great.
If I go over that, please just shout at me and bring me to a
okay. Oh, thank you for permission to do that.
No, that's all right. So morning, everybody. Great to be part of this. Paul Hallas. I'm a director of a group called SE24 Sustainable Energies. Surprisingly enough, based in London, SE24. But I haven't lived in London all my life. I'm originally from Leeds, so I'm delighted to see what Shannon and colleagues and partners have been doing in Yorkshire. That's absolutely brilliant. So I guess very briefly, just to introduce SE24, because you'll never have heard of us. We're a local community energy group in South London. We've been going since about 2015. And I think that Liz has said a little bit about us. So we've got 7 existing community rooftop solar projects, and we've done 3 LED lighting projects in local schools, mainly in Southwark, which is sort of South London, for those who don't know the area. You know, we're a community benefit society, so you know, it's all the usual stuff. We've got a community fund. We're not for profit, and you know, any financial surplus that we do realize, we push through and help people in fuel poverty in the local community. Yeah, I'll skip over this one. You can get the highlights. No doubt, you know, the materials will be circulated afterwards or put on the website or whatever. So I'll try and cover the solar side pretty briefly, because I think our business model is reasonably similar to that one that Shannon's just outlined. I guess I would just sort of re-emphasize maybe one of the points she made, which is that, you know, a lot of schools have had kind of difficult experience with installer only projects, so that, you know, solar panels have gone on the roof. After a few years, they stop working. It's nobody's job to notice, nobody's job to monitor. Schools say, I think it's not working, but we're not sure. You know, so apart from developing new projects, we've often been in to kind of fix existing installations, and one of the benefits of community energy is that we don't walk away. It's a long-term relationship. I think Shannon emphasized that. So we help schools to make sure that the solar continues to kind of operate in the way that it ought to be over the life of the assets, which I think normally sort of 25 years. So our model is rather similar to the one that Shannon outlined. I mean, normally we have a kind of a solar lease period. Recently, we've done 16 years, sometimes 20, and then at the end of that, you know, the assets are still good, and we transfer them to the school at zero cost. So there's no cost to the school at the front end. There's no cost to the school at the back end, and you know, particularly at today's unfortunately high electricity prices, the schools with solar assets are realizing good financial savings. So that is also great, apart from the benefit to the environment. Let me just sort of quickly skip on, talk a little bit more about LED, because we haven't touched on that so far. It's not massively different from solar PV, but it's a bit simpler, because you know, there isn't a huge kind of ongoing maintenance activity with LED lighting. Normally, LED lights should last for about 10 years. You know, if good quality equipment is installed properly and all that. So in this case, the contractual relationships tend to be sort of slightly shorter. We've got kind of a lighting services agreement we enter into with schools, typically over 10 years, which is the expected lifetime of LEDs. I guess that, you know, based on our experience, typically LEDs will probably save about half of the electricity consumption for lighting, which is usual with conventional equipment. So that is pretty significant. It's really helpful for schools. And again, schools have got a lot of the kind of characteristics you'd expect for a viable LED project. So, you know, typically the lighting is used quite intensively across the year. So again, that helps to kind of ensure the viability of the projects. As with solar, we raise the money at a relatively low cost, typically 3-4%. So there's no upfront cost to the school. Just to be on the safe side, we put in our contracts a kind of 3-month probationary period, so that, you know, the installers are on the hook for that as well. So if anything goes wrong in those 3 months, we, you know, replace any defective items. Normally doesn't happen, but we'll replace those at no cost to the school. School gets all the warranties. School gets an extra stock of LED lighting spares just in case. You know, not all of them last for the 10 years, which is their, you know, normal warranted life. And the financial savings can be, I think, quite substantial. So just give you an example of that. We recently sort of evaluated a potential project at a special needs through school. I think they've got about 500 conventional lights that need to be replaced. And we reckon they'll probably save, you know, if we go ahead with the project, they'll probably save about 50,000 quid over 10 years, which is really helpful. And especially, as I say, at today's high electricity prices. So it's not a million miles different from the solar model, but with a few differences, and it's a little bit. And I think, as I said at the beginning, we've so far done 3 school LED projects in our area, and we've got, you know, a bunch more in the pipeline. So hopefully, you know, if we speak again in a couple of years' time, we'll be able to add to that substantially. So I just thought it'd be helpful just to touch on this other area. I think Shannon talked about heat pumps at one point. You know, it does obviously depend on the school, but in London, we've still got a lot of schools which were originally built in, I don't know, 1880s, you know, so Victorian schools. And, you know, I think things weren't built for modern energy efficiency standards in those times. So maybe one of the things I should have said earlier on is that we quite often work with partners where we don't have all the experience ourselves. So there's a brilliant organization based in London called RAFT, or Retrofit Action for Tomorrow. So they're specialists in energy efficiency retrofit, low carbon heat, and all that sort of stuff, which I think Shannon's referred to already. We've got a project in the pipeline for a Southwark primary school. Again, part of the building is of that, you know, late Victorian vintage. The windows in particular leak energy at a fantastic rate, and you know, obviously that contributes to high energy losses, high energy bills, which no school wants. And what we're working on is trying to get a grant towards developing a feasibility project for that, establishing the priorities, the costs of sorting out the problems, and then I think Shannon probably referred to this already, but potentially the public sector decarbonisation scheme is a possible source of financing at the next stage, when you actually sort of go to, you know, try and replace or retrofit, you know, windows and doors. And I suspect that it's not a cheap project, and, you know, the cost will be, you know, fairly substantial. But the first priority is just to do the feasibility, and that's what we hope to do with the next year or so. So I thought it'd be worth, just before I finish, some quick reflections on, you know, what the key success factors are. You know, how can the community energy group really contribute to decarbonising schools and helping to meet, you know, local climate objectives and all that sort of thing. So, in our case, we unlike Solar for Schools, we're primarily volunteers. We do have a kind of volunteer coordinator who does a fantastic job, so he gets paid for 1 day a week. But apart from that, we're at this stage we're volunteers. Again, maybe a difference from Solar for Schools. We are focused locally, so our projects and most of our investors are locally based here in South London. I've talked about partnerships. We've also got a partnership with another community energy group for our LED projects. They're South East London Community Energy. I think various people have already talked about councils. So building good relationships with local councils is key. We've worked pretty hard over the last few years to kind of build a relationship with Southwark. I'm delighted to say that they're coming out now with their own community energy fund, which has just launched. I think that's going to be a fantastic step forward, not just for SE24, but for any community group that wants to take advantage of that. And I think it's really going to help to build an even more effective relationship with the council for the future. Maybe a statement of the obvious, but yeah, typically you need somebody on the inside who's going to champion a project within the school or the academy trust. So we work with both maintained schools and academy trusts. It is always really helpful to have somebody on the inside who says, yeah, this is a great thing to do, let's prioritize this, and it helps to clear the way. I've talked a little bit about the kind of what you're looking for in projects. I mean, typically we find community energy, if you've got a solar project that's less than about 40 kilowatts, it's going to be pretty difficult unless you've got an exceptionally large grant item. So there's kind of a minimum scale we find for community energy solar projects, and then for the lighting thing, the kind of high utilization of lighting that you get in schools is just perfect, but it could work on some of the community premises as well. I think Shannon touched on grant finance. I mean, I think we find it helpful in two senses, that grants for project feasibility in the development stage, for example, from the GLA's London Community Energy Fund, are really helpful. And then capital grants, we raise most of the money, I think, as others groups do. We raise most of our money from community investors. But I think capital grants, 20-30% or whatever it is, can help in two ways. They help deliver more of the financial savings to the schools, which is always great. And they also might help to get sort of more marginal projects over the line. So smaller projects which without a grant might not be viable, that the grant can really help get them over the line. So that, in a nutshell, is our experience of working with schools and councils to decarbonize the education sector. And I think we're going to hear the other presentation first, but obviously I'm very happy to take questions when we come to that part of the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Paul. That was great. I was sort of thinking as you were talking about it, how, it's a challenge, isn't it? Because LEDs, and certainly replacing doors and windows, is not nearly as sexy as sticking solar on the roof of the building, but really, really necessary and expensive. So thank you for that. I'm going to hand over now to Becky Connell, who's from Zellar. I've sort of brought Becky in really as I said to her, kind of like, it's like she's like this, obviously not the sprig of parsley, but almost like the sprig of parsley on your salad, the sort of the additional bit, because I don't know, in some ways I don't know how relevant this is for community energy groups, except I think this platform that she shared with me that schools can use seems quite affordable, and possibly something that if you've put solar on the roof of a school and you're looking to give the school some additional sustainability benefit, I thought this might be the sort of thing groups may want to gift to a school. So it was really, for me, it was just a little bit of frosting. I'm not trying to suggest in any way what you do is superficial, Becky, but it just seemed like a little bit of additional deliciousness. So I'll hand over to you now.
No, it's a good point. I feel like, well, hopefully this presentation will demonstrate that, but it really pulls everything together really nicely into one platform. But yeah, thank you very much for hosting, just echoing what Shannon said at the beginning. By way of a quick introduction, I'm Becky Connell, so Customer Success Lead at Zellar. heavily involved in our Zella Smart Schools programme. And obviously I'm going to be focusing in this presentation on the schools programme, but with the goal of making sustainability sort of actionable and affordable for schools. But also that relates to multi-academy trust, local authorities and communities more broadly. So I'm going to be focusing on the schools area, but looking at the 75 people we have on this list, there should be a bit of everything in there. So you'll find some relevancy there. We work with corporates, local authorities, individual schools, multi-academy trusts, sports clubs, healthcare, you name it, they're probably on the platform. So I'll run you through that now. If I can get my slides to work, hang on. There we go. Fab. So just a quick run through about what Zella does, so what the platform looks like. We offer a simple software platform. So we want to help organisations capture, measure, take action, engage, report and share their sustainability action. So all of the fantastic things they're doing through Solar for Schools or any other organisations, that they can add this into the platform, report on how that's impacting them and how that's helping them change. But likewise, if they're right at the beginning of their journey and they haven't done anything, it kind of gives them a roadmap of how they can take that action and what they should be reporting on going forwards. We also help them create usable action plans, particularly useful for schools now that the DFE have just announced that every school will have to have a climate action plan. So we help them create those, put that together and have something that they can download and export and share. We also help schools and other organisations connect with local and national biodiversity and volunteering projects, so that they can engage with them and have an impact in their local community. We also have a Zella score, and this really resonates with all schools. They seem to be very collaborative, yet also very competitive with one another, which is fantastic. So we have a scoring system and a profile that will help them share and track how they're doing with one another, against one another, against other businesses in their local area, and kind of get inspiration on where they can next take action. And Liz, as you said at the beginning, we really want to make this actionable and affordable for schools. So particularly for schools, we have a standard subscription of £200 per year per school. And as I go through the savings, which I'll do in a few slides' time, you'll be able to see that they should more than make that back very quickly. My slides seem to be a little bit slower, not working quite as fast as my brain. And then this slide just goes through what our partnership ecosystem looks like. So as I mentioned, we touch on a bit of everything. So we work with a huge range of corporate businesses. So we work with the Co-op Bank, Biffa, Volkswagen, Brian Curry, Online Direct, SSE Energy Solutions. You can see them all there. To extend this offering that we can promote to schools and other organisations on the platform. Additionally, we work with councils. So we're working with 12 councils at the moment, enrolling the Zella platform out to their area so that they can track what sustainability performance is looking like in their region. And obviously that sits across all different sectors, but schools is a huge part of that. They're really the hearts of communities, and they're educating the future generation who are all going to come into our jobs. So it's making sure that we're really collaborating on that. The schools themselves, so as I mentioned before, we work with individual schools, but also multi-academy trusts, various resource support groups, to name a couple on that list. And then additionally sports clubs and the healthcare system as well. So running various programmes in those sections. We worked really hard to establish this exclusive network of partners, and you can see there's such a huge range. So there is something for everyone there, no matter what they want to work on. And then going into a bit more detail for schools' experience on the platform, we really take them on a step-by-step journey. So the first case we look at is measuring those emissions. So, it's not just energy, it's also transport. We offer support with supply chain, how people are getting into school, etc., so that they can really build up this whole picture of what their carbon emissions are looking like and where their priority areas should be in terms of taking action. It's a step-by-step simple process. We don't want to overwhelm, but really breaking it down so that they can do that as and when they're ready to take that next step. And then off the back of that, you have reduction plans or climate action plans. So there'll be, ideas suggesting different things that they can get involved in, how they can involve the students. So whether, they have an eco group that they can get to find a volunteering project that they want to support, or take an energy checklist around their school to make sure, the heating's set up correctly. All of those different elements, just supporting, involving the students. And then the third one around projects and services. So Paul, you mentioned incredibly high energy rates at the moment. Zella has an in-platform energy switching service. So whether that's done at MATS, multi-academy trust level, or on the individual schools, we can help them switch energy at the right sort of time where possible, and then also onto the right contract. And the great thing about Zella is there are absolutely no broker fees attached to those. So it's very much the price you see is the price you get, and saving where they can. Additionally, just on the projects and services, so we also have green tech support, so they can add different things to their plan that they're interested in installing. So whether that's solar panels, LED lighting, or looking into sort of office equipment, like laptops, etc., bringing that into the platform as well. And then also the volunteering and biodiversity projects that they can be involved in. So whether that's something that PTA committees might want to support, or they're raising money for specific charities, or even visiting those different sites. It's got a bit of everything. And then the last three, just looking at that shareability and best practice. So we've got a community hub where schools can talk to one another, ask questions, but also we really didn't want schools to be siloed. They have their own requirements, their own expectations, but actually it's really important that they can relate this to what are other businesses doing? Can we get support? Can we involve the students in those other businesses and see what they're doing, see what their career paths can look like, and really get involved in it. So we've got that sort of brings everyone together, but also have separate sections within that. And then every business organisation on Zella has their own public profile. So they can share all of the fantastic actions that they're taking, whether that's decreases in emissions, or sustainability project support that they're promoting. They can share that with governors, other teachers, students, parents, anything like that. It becomes something that we really want to shout about what we're doing and encourage other schools and businesses to go on the same journey. And then this last point just looks at the action data. So from a multi-academy trust level or local authority level, being able to see how these actions all break down and what that means in terms of total emissions and what schools are doing. So if I just jump onto the next slide, that sort of breaks it down so they can see individual school data. If someone's a real outlier, what are they doing differently? And then how that stacks up into group data and performance tracking. Additionally, we know that all schools are different. So you've got different sizes in trusts or local authorities. So being able to benchmark is really important here. So being able to say, okay, how do our building emissions relate to other schools of a similar size? Are we using more gas, more electricity, etc.? And then being able to work with those schools in reducing that. And as I keep mentioning, this climate action plan becomes more and more important, as that is a requirement. So every school will be able to download their own sustainability plan. And then just quickly on the pilot, what we've been running so far. So we've now obviously launched this to be nationwide, but we did run a schools pilot at the beginning, which involved 90 schools. I'll let the numbers speak for themselves. So, lots of behaviour changes, lots of cost savings, lots of carbon reduction seen, green tech projects installed, and environmental projects being supported, which is fantastic. I think the slides will be shared after this, so you can go through that in your own time. But the numbers and the quotes really speak for themselves. And then just in terms of running back to that pricing, so individual schools can sign up for £200 per year. So again, you know, hopefully not going to break the bank, and they can really see those savings, and they'll have access to all of those services and their own data, obviously, and all of the support that we offer. At a multi-academy, a trust level and a county council level, you can purchase licenses for your schools in your region. And you can see sort of we do bulk license discount deals depending on the volume of schools that you're looking to bring on. But again, all of this will be shared, and we'll happily have you all on a demo at different points to really run through the platform in more detail, and you know, you can ask any questions on that. And then very quickly, hopefully I've got a few more minutes, just about the joining for the schools once you've got started. So they can sign up via the Zeller website. So there's a specific section for education. We really encourage every school to join an onboarding session where we really run through how the platform works, how they can make the most of it. And those sessions are obviously offered at regular intervals. So if they, you know, 1 month then they want a score boosting session, or they want to look specifically at energy, we can absolutely offer that, and we'll happily do so. And that's the end of the presentation.
Becky, thank you so much. I do think that's a really interesting platform. I was sort of also thinking, gosh, now does this compete with the Solar for Schools app? Probably not, but anyway, let's just get on to the questions, because there's some great questions, and I'd really like to hand over to Tom Day first, who had a comprehensive question, or that I assume there will be a comprehensive answer. So Tom, are you still here? Can anyone see him? Yeah. Tom? Oh, he's left. I think he's left. Tom, are you here? Yeah. Okay. Can you unmute yourself, Tom? Well, okay, well, we don't quite know what's happened to Tom Day. I really wanted him to ask his question. In that case, Kelly, I'm going to hand over to you because you had a question. Oh, stunning silence. Kelly, can you hear me?
Sorry, my system seems to be very slow today, a bit
Okay.
like my brain probably. So yeah, my question is, I'm working with community energy groups that are developing and some of them are here today. Hello everyone. Developing projects in Suffolk and Central Bedfordshire, and my question really was, do you have any, it was to Paul, and I've spoken to Shannon about this already, about top tips of how you've got those inside people within the school. Some of my groups are working really hard to sort of build the relationship with the school, but as you know, schools are really busy, so any top tips would be really helpful. That was to Paul.
Yeah, thanks, Kelly. Yeah, it's a great question, and I wish I had a very neat answer to it. I mean, it's mainly networks, to be honest. So, you know, from our point of view, we've got 7 directors. We've got a bunch of volunteers, I guess, between 5 and 10 volunteers. We've got about 100 investors now, so it's kind of built up over a period of time, and all of them have got their own kind of connections, friends, networks, and so on. So a lot of it sort of comes that way. Yeah, I'm not sure that I mean, the only other thing I think I did touch on already is just kind of relationships with the council, and you've just got to invest time and effort in that and building profile. I've noticed a big improvement in our relationship with the council in over the last 3-4 years, and quite often that leads to opportunities as well. And obviously we try to ensure we keep good contacts with local MP, local councillors, and so on. That can all make a difference. So there's no kind of silver bullet with this, but I you know, I think is the power of networks, which just goes beyond anything that any single individual could ever kind of bring to the party. So that for me is the is the main sort of focus as far as we're concerned.
Shannon, do you have anything to add?
I'm more than happy to. I was just going to say it's yeah, I think it's one of the hardest things. It's definitely just existing contacts. If existing contacts not there, Kelly, there might be some. I'm just thinking if there's any kind of groups that are running that like bring schools together, that we might be able to share like a contact list or something like that, so I can have a look and see if we can share anything with you. For example, there are business manager conferences, regional groups, things like that. So we've been brought into like meetings around that through existing business managers where we've worked. So, you know, it's that kind of 1 degree of separation. But I think some of those networks are also open to just kind of joining as well. And they're always looking for speakers. So I'll see if there's any existing contacts that we might be able to share to support groups in your area to like have an in. And I'd just say, yeah, maybe having a look if there's any regional groups that are bringing schools together to discuss things like that, and seeing if you can get on as a speaker or something like that. I'll see what we can send across.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Shannon. I mean, I probably should have mentioned that. I mean, quite often our local councils have got their own low carbon schools programs, and they're quite often organising seminars, webinars, and they're looking for speakers. And so, you know, all those type of things come together. I think that is a really helpful, you know, providing you've got the supportive council. I think that's a really helpful way to go.
So Becky, do you have any experience of that? And after you've commented, if you do, a question from Martin Bierman, and then a question from Henry Lovegrove.
Are those the ones in the chat, Liz? Sorry.
They will be, yeah, they will be.
Oh, okay, understood. I think Shannon and Paul covered most of what I'd want to say there.
Okay, so Martin, over to you, and then Henry, over to you.
I think things are moving forward. I mean, when we recently, some years ago, had an extension to the school, which was ideal for solar panels, the county council, of all people, were resistant to putting them on as the extension was being built, which seemed to me the right time to be doing the solar panels. But putting that aside, now they're on and they're working, but what they're actually doing is a big secret. And to me, as far as the schools programme is concerned, the educational side of it is so important. Discussing with the kids, showing what's going on. And what I have tried to do and seriously failed to do is to get, and I think Zella have addressed it rather well, so that's answered a lot of questions, but is to get a large display in the reception area at the school so that the kids coming in and visitors can see what's going on and it can be discussed, and it's sort of part of the educational process. In my particular case, I'm a governor at a primary school, so it would have to be at that level. Clearly now there's plenty of software which will help in that way, as Becky has explained. But I don't know whether Becky's system means that you get the hardware, like the sort of thing I'm talking about, a big display in the hall included in your 200 quid. If it is, I think I'll almost pay myself now. But you know.
Okay, so over to Becky and then Shannon.
Yeah, sadly not the hardware itself, Martin. That would be very impressive. But the software, absolutely. And in terms of assets as well, we're over the past year that we were running the pilot, you know, we really wanted to get a big understanding of what do schools need to have to help them spread this message. And a shareable profile and having a climate action plan is really part and parcel of that. So if you do need any further support, we'll happily pick that up on a one-to-one basis.
I mean, can you point us in a direction of vendors who are competitive for, as I say, large displays?
We do actually have a couple of those on the platform. I've never been asked that question before, but I do know a couple of people who do have, you know, either big screens or something we can look into. But again, you know, wanting to make sure that's as sustainable as possible. So, well, let's pick that up.
Right, thank you.
Paul and Shannon, do please interject if you have comments, and everyone else as well. Put, you know, if you know vendors and things, do put it in the chat.
Yeah, there are various. I mean, I wouldn't, advocate any particular vendor of display units, but there are various ones. But Solar Fox, for example, based in Germany, is one of the vendors that we've used in the past.
Shannon?
Thanks, Liz. Yeah, no, I mean, I don't have anything to touch on that, but I just wanted to really thank Martin for that contribution on the importance of education. I think it is often missed. And Becky, I thought your presentation was wonderful. I'm really excited by the platform. So thank you very much for sharing that. And the only thing that I was just going to throw into the chat was for one of the things that we're also finding, Martin, is that we have a lot of requests from our schools that want the kind of visuals in the reception. And then we also, a couple of years back, also had schools asking for things online where the business manager, for example, wanted to be able to log on to like a section of the website and to see like the energy data in the charts, and they wanted to bring it into their kind of lessons and things, so particularly maths. So I've just shared in the chat an example of a profile page. So when a school gets an installation, we have kind of visual charts and data so that students can see what's actually happening every 15 minutes from their system. But so it's that kind of also trying to integrate it into things like the website as well as like physically in the school. So I think there's a real push across schools just in any way to make things like solar visible and to start conversations. So hopefully that's in the right direction in terms of education.
Go on, Kevin, you've something to add.
Sorry, yeah, I've come with many hats on today because I'm a chair of governors as well as supporting and collaborations with Zella across, academia, working with UCL. There's some brilliant points raised today. One about making everything visible. And as a chair of governors, I kind of hats off to everybody's comments, because if things are visible and people are engaged in the mission, there's more likely to be behaviour change and action for the whole community. So I love that. But also one thing we found through having a focus like the platform is that operationally and educationally coming together is really powerful, because obviously the education part of this is crucial, because we've got to, children need to understand why we're all doing this. And by involving them with the operational teams, raising profiles of those roles in schools, it's been incredible to see the business manager is all of a sudden everybody understands their role is really crucial. And for children to see how important that role is, because usually, well, often that role is kind of separated, but and we're working with Earth Cubs at the minute to engage 4 to 11-year-olds for them to understand their environment, their community, but also the people involved in this journey. So I think some really brilliant points there. I've thoroughly enjoyed listening to everybody. Thank you.
Henry, over to you.
Hiya. A couple of local points, if possible, and then a question. Firstly, Dorset County Council actually installed solar panels or unilaterally on all their county schools except for 1 or 2 which weren't viable, I believe. So that's actually competed with our setup in that we have a smaller market now. But interestingly, they actually extended some installations which were ours. So we have to juggle about with the finances to deal with that. But it's perfectly feasible to get extended. If you get a new roof, offered a new roof, you can take it and it can be sorted out. DCE actually funds LED schemes in schools through its community fund, so that's another option you've got available to do that, and as it's a good use of community fund money. That's right. And then the question I've got is the outstanding question I've got is for Shannon. Yeah, more details please of your flexible pricing. What's do that, and what's the final outcome in the various scenarios and actually what you charge per kilowatt? Give us some examples.
Of course, Henry, thanks very much for that. I've still been meaning to make my way down to Dorset because I've always been really inspired by the work there. I know that Dorset for a long time has, particularly kind of the regional networks and stuff, have been a real pioneer for community energy. So thank you very much just for all the work that you've done, and it's lovely to meet each other. In terms of the flexibility of pricing, and examples for that, and kind of the broader examples on what we kind of typically offer when schools come to us. So in terms of flexibility of pricing, that's actually something that has been brought in the past couple of years. So I didn't touch on this in the presentation just because it's quite a hard thing to summarize as we in like a very short presentation. But when I said that Solar for Schools is a school run program, what I mean is that the Community Benefit Society, the organisation behind it, the governance structure in terms of the members that have voting rights within the organisation, commonly what the people that will have the voting rights are obviously the funders and the people supporting the projects through the finance. But with our programme, it's the schools that have gone through the programme and that have the solar systems that are actually the voting members. So the programme nationally is run by its schools, and that's a mixture of governors and school staff and things like that, people that come together and they want to make wider decisions to support schools in the programme. One of the things that they brought in the past couple of years is that need to have flexibility in pricing. That was in result and in response to the energy price increases over the past couple of years. So in terms of that being put into practice, it's actually relatively new in the programme. I've got a school right now that is looking to, in every one of our projects, we have a thing called the kind of profit share. So the schools using the electricity, obviously, over the long term helps the programme kind of run itself in terms of financially. So we don't rely on grants and things. The schools using the electricity allows the programme to recoup those costs and then to support other schools. But in each project, there's also a small amount, usually a couple of £1,000 that's kind of generated surplus profit in a project. That goes back to our schools because the Community Benefit Societies, the members are at schools, so all the financial benefit goes to them. I've got a school right now that is looking to use that profit pot and reinvest it into their project so that they can lower their solar price again. In terms of how that's looking for them, it's usually maybe like 1 or 2p reduction in their price in terms of a couple of £1,000 in the project. But obviously that's kind of it's in practice right now. So I wish I had an example of like where that's been done, but it's a good example, I think, of the governance structure and how the programme itself is actually constantly evolving in response to what schools need. But I'm more than happy to speak on that more, but that's kind of the up-to-date what I can give you for that. In terms of what we offer schools generally for pricing, we do it on a site-by-site basis, so it really depends on the school. For example, if you're looking at maybe like a large secondary school, really high energy needs, great roofs, and is in like a good area for sunlight, all the ticks and all the boxes, we can offer, I've had a school recently where we're looking at kind of 14-15p, as opposed to what they're on before is about 28p for their fossil fuel energy. Small primary school, it can be anywhere between kind of 19 to about 25-26p, really depends on the school. What we tend to do is we won't offer a school like a fully funded project if we can't beat what they're currently paying for their fossil fuel energy. And we, at the minute, we're not offering schools funding that are kind of anywhere close to the 28p that we're expecting in the pricing market recently, because what we don't want to do is we don't want to say to schools, your solar price will be lower than what you're paying for your fossil fuels, and then it's not. So we're a bit conservative when we offer funding to schools, because what we want to do is under promise as opposed to over. But I hope that gives you a bit of an idea. So it's a site-by-site basis. Yeah.
Thanks, Shannon. I've got Lynn Collard made a comment, which I think is a question worth raising. So, Lynn, over to you.
Yes, hello. I live in a very small village in North Essex, and most of the examples have been of large schools in cities or towns. Now, we really do need to cut down our energy costs. I'm a school governor. Our parish council is actually looking at trying to fund a solar energy project for the public buildings in the middle of the village. So we actually have a community-run shop, community-owned pub, and a community-owned brewery. So for a village of 500 people, you know, we're busy. So what we would like to do is to include those 3 community-owned businesses, the school, the church, and the village hall, all of which are in the centre of the village. Now, this sounds as though it's a bit of a bespoke one. I don't know how any of these companies would be able to advise us about that. Or is it big enough?
Would it be all right, Liz, if I just
please do
really brief? But Lynn, I think that sounds fabulous. We have a lot of schools that are wanting to work with other buildings as well. I think it's amazing when it can happen. My leaning is that, so in general, when we're looking at kind of smaller schools in rural areas, it's a reason why there was a few years ago the Rural Community Energy Fund programme. They're just a lot harder to make it work to offer fully funded projects unless you can find grant funding. But my leaning is, I don't know if you have.
Sorry, excuse me. Yeah.
No worries.
I suggest you answer anyway, because we're going to be being recorded.
That's okay.
Yeah, I was just going to say, more than happy to check eligibility. So this is a reason why we signed this partnership with National Grid right now, because what they're finding is that it's an unequal kind of access to solar. So rural primaries really miss out, and so I don't know if you have like an address or a postcode, but I'd be more than happy to check if they're eligible for the grant funding, because at the minute National Grid are offering up to £25,000 per project. So if you're a small primary, that could cover the quite a huge amount of the costs. So if there's a postcode or an address and you want me to check that for you, I'd be more than happy to.
Yes, thank you very much. Okay, shall I send that to you or just tell you now?
If you want, well, you can either pop it into the chat or I can send you a direct message, whichever's easiest.
Yes, you send me a direct message, please. Thank you.
No worries.
Lynn, I think on that as well, just going forward, that can work hand in hand. So we don't, we're not just looking at big schools or schools even in general. We sit across all sectors and all sizes. So if energy tracking and then finding other ways that you can reduce your overall energy consumption is something you want to look into, then we'll more than happily support that. And we can have a look at grants as well. So, it might be something that Shannon and I can work on for you both at the same time.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
That sounds great, Becky. I'll be more than happy to.
I'm trying really hard to bring Tom Day into the conversation, but he's having technical issues. So I don't know can anyone see the question that he asked earlier, because it was such a good question that I wanted to hear a discussion around.
It's Luciana here.
Oh, hi, Luciana. Can you ask the question? Yeah,
yes.
that would be great.
Okay, so the question is 2 questions in one. So hi Shannon, great presentation. Can you say a bit more about how you were funded? You mentioned community investment funding, but could you please expand on that? And then kind of the second question is about the involvement with community energy groups. How do the community energy groups benefit from that relationship? Do they get a share of the saving that the school makes on the electricity bill?
Hi, Luciana. Thank you very much. It's lovely to meet you. and thank you for the questions. I think Kelly also might have shared a link, which I'll try and find, and I'll pop it into the chat also, just so people can have a look. But to respond to the community investment question first, the link that Kelly shared earlier was a link to our kind of current fundraising, so I'll pop that into the chat as well. In terms of the community investment, we work with an online platform called Ethics. So it's online kind of crowdfunding. And as opposed to kind of community shares, we work with community bonds just because it's a more secure investment for people. So and because we've got a track record, we can offer bonds as opposed to shares. So it's we offer that to on the kind of Ethics platform. And we've been doing that since, so we have multiple kind of fundraising rounds. So since 2016, we've fundraised, I would say definitely, I was going to say over 4 million, but I will say over 3 million. I think we're coming close to 4 million now with the latest fundraise. And what that's done, Luciana, is that as we fundraise kind of a large pot of money for the next group of schools. So we don't fundraise on a school by school basis. We fundraise as like a pot of the next schools. And then the people that fund, the funders kind of those pots, we actually have a lot of people who have fundraised multiple times. So a lot of the funders are kind of repeated funders. They really like and they want to support schools specifically. They're from a mixture across the UK. We find most of our funders are women over 45, mix of geographic spreads actually, but we've got about 700 bondholders across the country now, from 2016 onwards, and yeah, kind of a mix of geographies, but we do find a pattern of women over 45, and people can invest from as little as £500, and what they do is they'll put in their pot of funds to support a school, and then we repay that over 5 years, and then we also have 5% interest, which we pay back to them as well. So where local authorities, for example, maybe want to use the UK Infrastructure Bank, you can borrow money cheaper than the 5% interest. So that's why if, for example, a council wanted to use that money and take schools solar through that route, the programme can actually offer like even lower prices for schools because your cost of borrowing is cheaper. But that's our kind of current investment. So about 700 bondholders around the country since 2016, and over 3 million. I think we're coming close to 4 million fundraised. And in terms of community energy groups, so it really varies between group. The way, so there's a few ways that kind of groups can work with us. So some really want to be involved in like the development process, the actual kind of solar development. So they'll introduce kind of schools to us, and then we'll kind of be involved in the development. So the initial site visits, the kind of communications to schools, so that kind of process, getting the school ready for installation. Some of our groups want to be more involved in the education side of things. So they don't really want to be involved in the development. They kind of want to be CC'd into emails and kept updated. So we'll have like a regular call. But actually what they care about is they want to be in the school in that kind of long-term relationship. So we have education partners. They will do things, they'll join us on kind of the annual inspections, they'll do the education delivery, so they'll get training from us on things like the app and the kind of open source. We've got a solar design software which we take into schools, and they'll deliver kind of workshops with us. In terms of how they make income, again, it changes between partners. So we offer groups kind of an introducer kind of fee. So if they want to get paid for making contacts with schools, we offer that. If they help us deliver education, they get paid as an education partner. Groups, it has to be up to the schools, so they have to work with the schools. If, for example, they wanted to split the savings, what we say is that the school also has to consent to that, because that's the most important thing, that the schools are also happy. I haven't had a school that no schools have had issues with that, but I also haven't had a school or a community group that's kind of wanted to do that. But there would be nothing stopping a community group if they wanted to split the savings with schools, if the school was also happy with it. The main way that community groups uses at the minute is, York's a really good example of this. They'll kind of use the programme to fundraise a number of projects, and then will use the time saved to develop other parts of work. So York, for example, has created their Warmer Homes programme. They've created a retrofit service that actually brings them in quite a bit of income. So thermal imaging and things like that, helping people with fuel poverty, and getting grant funding for those bits of work. So they'll kind of use the solar to create those contacts and those ins kind of within their area. And then they'll develop other bits of work which make income as well. And then the idea is that over the next 5 or 10 years, maybe the group will have enough income to buy back the solar. So it will be owned by the community, and then they will kind of generate the profit and the income with the school. So the groups kind of use it in different ways, but there's lots of ways that they can develop kind of income from it. So sorry, I know that's because groups are so different, we work quite differently with each individual group, but more than happy if there's particular groups that you're thinking of. I know Nick mentioned that kind of Community Energy South are doing lots of work with groups in the area, so I'd be really happy to have a conversation if there was.
I'm going to interrupt you now, Shannon, because I'm conscious that we've got 3 minutes left and I should be wrapping up, but we have 3 questions, three questioners in rapid fire. We've got Steve Campbell with a question, Henry Lovegrove with a question, and actually the third one was a bit of a sort of moral or debatable question, which is maybe a bit complicated to do in 3 minutes, which was the question from Jeremy Wyatt about schools getting profit. Oh, and then there was a question from Sylvia Wyatt as well from Great Green Bedouin. So Steve, if you could chuck your question out there quickly. Henry, chuck yours out there quickly. If
I'll
you need
take
to
mine
leave,
offline with Solar for Schools. I'll pick up separately about how the funding streams work. So
thanks, Steve. Right, Henry.
Shannon, just how do you fix your annual price rises, please?
Sorry, Henry, I missed the first bit of that.
How do you determine your annual price increases? Presumably you have something built into your contracts.
Yeah, so all they're built with RPI, so RPI indexed. So
and then Sylvia, I mean, it was a question in the chat box, but you might as well ask it here.
Well, Jeremy's had to go to another meeting, but and we can take that offline, his question offline with other. I was wondering whether anybody got any work going on in Wiltshire or near Wiltshire that we could link to, because it seems to be a bit of a desert. I'm involved with Wiltshire Wildlife Trust, which is thinking of has got a small community energy company trust, and is wanting to do more with schools. So I'm trying to find a local partner. But maybe go to schools for energy, but you don't work down here, so it's energy for schools. So it's really does anybody know anything that's going on in this southwest?
Just unmute yourself if you do and throw your answer in, please, everybody.
I can chip in quickly. We're talking with Wiltshire County Council about bringing our pathway service there, so this might be something that happens soon. We'll see.
Wait, sorry, who are you? I can't see.
Sorry, I'm Community Energy South, working closely with Liz.
Okay. Well, maybe talk offline then, if please.
It's Paul here. I think somebody did a solar project, a kind of breakthrough solar project on Salisbury Cathedral, if I remember correctly.
Yes, they've got PV on solar, but it's invisible from all around.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it would have to be, wouldn't it? So I think that was Solar for All did that, if I remember correctly. And then I think I might have mentioned Retrofit Action for Tomorrow. I know they've been doing some work on not just solar, it's kind of a broader decarbonisation project for a primary school in Salisbury. So again, Harry Paticus is the guy who leads RAF. So I mean, there was a couple of people you might want to sort of pick up.
Brilliant, thank you.
Sylvia, just to add to that, we've definitely got some organisations on the platform in that region who are sort of sustainability focused. So we can pick that up when we catch up.
Thanks.
And thank you to Jem in the chat. I have one very final question, but if you need to leave, just go. Thank you so much, everybody, for all your time. And thank you to all the speakers for the time you put in advance as well in preparing your presentations. I really hope it's been valuable. I've certainly found it really interesting. And my question, with my former Avesco hat on, because we have a few schools that we did solar projects on our schools. But Shannon, I love your Solar for Schools app. So can non-solar for schools groups use the app?
I was going to say, I think you've just made mine and Danielle's day. We're looking for schools that might be interested in terms of getting feedback on the app and its like kind of latest development in terms of being available in ICT lessons. So if you're interested, all the education, you don't have to be a Solar for Schools school to gain some of the education, but if you're wanting to have a look at the app specifically, yeah.
Okay, let's have a chat afterwards. Thanks. I'm not at Avesco anymore, but I will just mention it to them. Okay, well, that looks like that's it. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending. I hope you've got some useful information out of the session, and I hope people can leave with information and inspiration about how to take things forward in your own communities. We will share the recording and we'll share the presentations, and if anybody wants to make sure you're contactable, put your contact email in the chat box, because we will share the chat with everybody too. We have a folder with, you know, everything from this particular session, so we'll share that with everyone. So do put your contact details in the chat if that's useful. And otherwise, thank you very much for joining. David, you have to say, oh, it does say where you're from. Great. Well done, Becky. Good shout.
Thank you very
Maria.
much.
Oh, yeah, we can see
Everyone,
Maria.
have a very good day.
Yeah, thank you very much, Paul. Thanks for your time.
Pleasure. Great to
Thank
be
you.
part of it.
Great. Okay, thanks, everyone. Oh, we're down to 32. 29. Stop recording now.
Yeah.